Hello and welcome to Books to Last podcast, the podcast that usually challenges book lovers to pick the only 5 books they can take with them when cast away to a mystery remote location. Except this episode is going to be slightly different because if you've been following my social media, you will know that I've spent the last 4 days at Cheltenham Literature Festival and it's been my first time here and I've had just such an amazing time that I wanted to talk about it. Now, you'll notice my voice is a little bit croaky. Believe it or not, this is miles better than what it was recently. I've had a cough, which has only just gone away, but it's not given me my voice back yet. So bear with me. Hopefully you stop noticing it after a while. I usually would just wait until I was feeling a lot better, but I have just had such a good time that I wanted to talk about it fresh off the bat. And not only that, but I actually had a bit of a strange information gathering experience when I was trying to come to the festival for the first time myself, because I didn't know anybody who'd been to it before, not anybody in my day-to-day life anyway, though I know some previous guests of the podcast are very big into it, and actually in hindsight I probably should have asked them, like Dan from Eris Biblio and others, but I'm not very good at remembering those things in the moment. So I mostly just took to independent online research. And what I really wanted was one of those blog posts that says everything you need to know about going to Cheltenham Literature Festival. Now, if there is one out there, I could not find it. Maybe I just don't get my search options correct. But I took a little bit of a while to get my head around just how the Literature Festival worked. So I wanted to, for the benefit of others who might come after me, do this episode so that people could maybe get the benefit of some of the little lessons that I learned on my first time round. Now, because of my first time round, there are some things I may get wrong. I definitely don't know everything. I haven't got all the hot tips. So if you did want to do a little bit of extra research outside of this, I would definitely encourage it. But as just a little primer, if you've never heard of Cheltenham Literature Festival, or you have but don't know what it is, and it's just one of those things you've heard about, Cheltenham Literature Festival is one of 4 festivals that the Cheltenham Festivals organisation put on. It's one of the oldest and most prestigious literary festivals in the UK. It dates back to 1949. It takes place annually in the town of Cheltenham, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous place in Gloucestershire in the UK, which is worth a visit just regardless of whether there is a literature festival on or not. It's amazing. It's a really nice place that I enjoy visiting regularly myself. Now, the festival typically spans over 10 days. It's usually in October, and it has a really large programme of really varied events, which includes author discussions, panels, book readings, writing workshops, loads of events for kids, all sorts. It's a really, really diverse and interesting group of events, all located around the now I'm going to pronounce this wrong, the Montpellier Gardens in Cheltenham Town Centre. Now, the aim of the festival is to celebrate and promote literature and the arts, but they also do loads of amazing outreach work in terms of supporting literacy in Cheltenham more generally. They open the festival to school children who do trips, and I've been incredibly jealous of the hordes and hordes of school children that I've seen over the past few days getting to go to a literature festival for their school trip, which I never got to do. So I have been ever so slightly jealous, but it's a really, really great organisation. So we've been told this past few days that because of the money going towards like tickets and membership and all that sort of thing, which I'll get into later, the festival has been powered by, I think, vegetable oil or biofuel instead of gas or diesel this time. So they've been more sustainable with their festival, and it's just a really great event. So this, like I say, is my first time having been to the festival, and I don't know why I decided to come this year, to be honest, because I've wanted to come for many times, but there's always been an excuse or a reason why not. Like, I don't know, last year I was a new mum, and then the year before that I was pregnant, and then, years previous there was always something else going on or something that needed to be done, and by the time it came round to it was a bit late, because you do really need to be a little bit forward planning, I think, to come. It's if you're not a local, because I mean the locals here, well, they certainly know how lucky they are, because I've spoken to many of them the past few days. They can just pop into the festival, they can just get tickets at the events that they want to, and it's a bit less of an undertaking. But if you're coming from a bit further afield, you need to plan it like you would any big event outside of your own town. So I decided to come this year because I was kind of given a nudge to plan it very early on by my husband, who thought it would be a really nice way for me to just go and reconnect with the sort of bookish part of myself and get a little bit of breathing space, because, being a parent and working full time and just life gets very, very busy and very hectic. And it's been a really nice few days away and I've really enjoyed it. Now, I've been to a fair few events while I've been here, definitely not as many as I would have liked to, but I had to be a little bit conservative small c, in my choice of which events I went to, because as I will get into a bit later, the tickets are all paid for separately, so it can really add up if you try and go to everything. Also, there's many, many clashes, so you definitely can't go to everything, even if you could afford to. And also, it can be quite a long day. The events start in the morning. I think the earliest one I went to is 10 a.m., but there's some that start from 8:30 in the morning and they go until like 9 o'clock at night. So, you've got to pick your battles. Some of the events that I've been to, I say some, I'm probably going to list them all. I went to the Hutchinson Heinemann Proof Party, which was a great way to start the festival, and I wish I'd been able to get tickets for more proof parties. There was Shakespeare the Book, which is a discussion about the 400-year anniversary of the publishing of Shakespeare's first folio. Celebrate with Eleanor Catton was the third event I went to, which was celebrating the anniversary of Eleanor Catton's book, The Luminaries, which I absolutely had to attend, not because I've read The Luminaries, although I have started it in the last few days, but because it was picked on the podcast and I've heard amazing things, and they are so well deserved after the discussion and after reading about a third of the book now. It's just extraordinary. It's an extraordinary piece of work, and Eleanor Catton was absolutely hilarious. She was just so sort of natural and authentic. She was just great. I then went to the Times Radio debate, which was debating what election year it is, which was a bit of fun because it's from a podcast / radio show that I listen to quite regularly. So it was nice to see that in person instead of hearing it over the airwaves. Truth to Power was a political cartoonist from the Times newspaper. For those of you who don't know, political cartoons are one of my kind of niche sort of nerdy interests that I've held since I studied history in secondary school. I just think they are a fascinating medium of critiquing leaders, but also they're just so witty, and the people who produce them are so talented. It's just I'm just in awe. So I really enjoyed that. They did some live drawings where we got to guess who they were drawing. That was really, really fun. Then today I have been to see Mary Beard, who is the famed and well-lauded historian on the Roman Empire, and she was talking about her book, The Emperor of Rome, which I have not read yet, but can't wait to read because she's just really brilliant. She does what she does and she's good at it. And her talk about dining in the Roman Empire with the Emperor was really interesting. Then I went to a somewhat familiar show, which was called Desert Island Books with Nicola Sturgeon, in which the former First Minister of Scotland picked the 6 books she would take with us if she could take with her to a desert island, and picked one song. Now, I couldn't possibly remember all 6 books on the spot right now, although it was a fascinating list with lots of Scottish authors, which I definitely need to check out. But she did choose Sisters Doing It For Themselves as her song, which I, to be honest, haven't heard in a really long time, or at least not consciously listened to in a really long time. But I was really grooving as we came out. It was a really great way to end what was a really interesting discussion, because Nicola Sturgeon, heard of her, obviously. In the UK, it's kind of hard not to. She is always someone I've kind of respected because she's a woman in politics who is clearly very strong, no matter what you might agree or disagree with her politics. She is someone that you can't help but kind of have some respect for, because she really has conviction in her beliefs, and I think she stands very strong in a very male-dominated profession, because there is a lot more men in politics than there are women. And I think it was interesting to get to know her on a non-political, more personal level. She talked about collecting books and reading books being two separate things that she enjoys and that she loves, and how her bookshelves overflow, and she gets grief on Twitter for why she's got time to read at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night instead of working, which is probably not something that many of us are super familiar with. But it was just really interesting to find that Nicola Sturgeon is not someone I would have thought I had much in common with. I don't know why, but she isn't. And yeah, it was a really great discussion. And yes, very reminiscent of what we do on the podcast. So yeah, I enjoyed it from that perspective as well. Then there was a great panel discussion this afternoon on writing historical fiction, how not to lose the plot, which had two authors who I actually, I'm very, very sorry to say, I wasn't very familiar with, Sarah Dunant and Alan Mallinson. Now, I really want to read a lot of their books now because they sound really fascinating, but it was a really interesting writerly discussion about the craft of writing, but specifically writing historical fiction and where the line between truth and imagination and how much research you have to do, and how you battle with certain things with your process. It was just so interesting. I couldn't possibly talk about all the points that they talked about because it was really in depth, and they were just really wonderful people. I mean, Sarah Dunan, I want to be her when I grow up. She is she was wonderful. She was just brilliant. Now, I did say I wanted to record this episode after I'd completed my time here. However, I found out that my checkout time is 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, so I will not have anywhere to record this, and I don't fancy doing it on the train, which is why I have recorded this before I go to my final two events tomorrow, which are Lemony Snicket in the morning, which I plan to use to possibly try and get a treat for a friend of mine that it will remain nameless just in case it doesn't pan out and I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I've got plans. So yeah, Lemony Snicket Talk, which I actually think is aimed at children tomorrow, but I've ended up going to it anyway. And Natalie Haynes' Divine Might. So she's talking about her most recent book, which is, again, I've got a bit more mythology in there. I guess I've gone quite history and mythology heavy in this last few days. But Natalie Haynes, I mean, the event isn't until 4 o'clock, and don't get me wrong, it's been a long few days. I'm going to be quite tired. I do wonder if I'm going to maybe regret signing myself up to something at 4 o'clock. But I just had to because it's Natalie Haynes and she's brilliant. So yeah, those are my two events tomorrow. I was supposed to go to an event on the evening of Friday the 13th, the Gothic Cabaret, which, I mean, it sounded amazing, and I really, really wanted to go when I bought the ticket. The issue was I had overestimated how utterly burnt out by socializing and putting up with so much stimulus in the day would affect me. So I kind of got to the end of the day and it was about 6 o'clock and I was going to have to walk back to my accommodation in the rain, and I was just feeling completely overstimulated, completely over socialized, and I felt like I was sort of on the verge of a crash, and I was worried if I forced myself to go to it, I was probably going to get myself into a bit of a tiz today. In fact, I probably would have spent most of today in bed. So yeah, sadly had to pick my battles with that one, but hopefully I'll be able to get it another time. Now, I've gotten a bit of reading done here, not as much as I had optimistically hoped for, but I finished The Return of the King. I read Peter Brooks's newest collection, Torrid Times, which is his political cartoons, which admittedly was quite a quick read because it's mainly pictures, but still thoroughly interesting and insightful overview of the last few years. And I am about halfway through The Ocean at the End of the Lane in preparation for Drop City Books, which is our new local bookstore. They're having a book party. So I got halfway through that. And then also, as I said earlier, read about a third of The Luminaries, which is fantastic. So yeah, all been really, really interesting. I did post a bunch of my stories on some of the proofs that I managed to pick up from the Heinemann Proof Party, which I recommend all 4 of the books that were there. So if you head on over to my Instagram and then go to the highlights, I have got them all saved to the Cheltenham Literature Festival 2023 highlight. Now, the aim of this podcast is to give a little bit of advice and maybe a few pointers to anyone who's never been to the festival and if they would like to, things to maybe look out for. So first area is tickets. I had a bit of confusion over the tickets. for this festival, because in my head, festivals are like music festivals, and you buy one ticket and then they let you into the grounds, and then it's sort of a free-for-all. You just go to whatever you want to go to and you just show up at the stage and then things happen. This, not exactly like that. I mean, it's similar. Comic-Cons are kind of the same, aren't they? You buy your tickets, you go in, and then it's just first come, first served basis for the events. Now, this is not like that. And I felt like the website didn't quite explain that properly until the tickets were available, which is ever so slightly too late. So the way it actually works with the Cheltenham Literature Festival is the programme gets released. This year it was about mid-August. So all the events are announced. You can go through and you can pick which ones you really want to go to, and you sort of wish list them. And they all get added to a wish list for your account. So then when the tickets are released, which is usually a couple of weeks later, the date will get announced. You can then go to the website on that date and you just press one button, and everything that's in your wish list that you want to go to automatically gets removed to your basket, and you just pay for them then. And then you have individual tickets to all of the separate events, because they are all separately ticketed events, which actually makes a lot of sense, because I don't really know if authors or publishing houses or whoever make any money off this, but in my head, I suppose, like Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the tickets are all separate because ultimately they are separate individual events. They're just coming together as part of like one program. So when the program is released, highlight what events you want to go to, add them to your wish list. On the day of sale, they all get added to your checkout basket, and then you buy them. Now, this leads to a slightly related thing in that membership of the Cheltenham Literature Festival group, they get access to tickets a week earlier than the general public. So there is a pre-sale, I suppose you'd call it, for members of the festivals. And then a week later, the general public get released. Now, the membership is charged annually even. So there's 4 tiers, the cheapest one being about £17.50, going up to the most expensive, which is about £90. And basically the big difference between all 4 tiers is how many tickets for the events you can buy. I would say it's probably worth it. The lowest tier, Joyful, like I say, is £17.50 for the entire year. So mine will still be valid for next year. And I can use that to buy tickets when they get released. And it gives me them access to them a week early. Now, there is a 5th free level of membership for 18 to 30-year-olds called Spark, so Spark members, they do get access to them earlier, but a day later. Now, you might think that is just as good, and in most instances it is just as good, but a lot of the events do sell out. And if you have got your eye on any of the proof parties or any of the really big authors, so like Zadie Smith was here this week and she sold out really quickly. So did a lot of other events. A lot of the writing workshops sell out quite quickly. So the really popular events that you might have your eye on do usually sell out. So if you do have to wait that day or that week, there is a chance that your list may get shorter. Now, that might actually be a good thing, because what I know now, which I would take on board later, is it's a really long day. Like I said earlier, you really need to pace yourself, and actually having a much shorter list of events that you can go to, because some of them have sold out, might do you a favor in the long run. So my advice would be to maybe aim for 2 or 3 events in one day at most, because you're then not running around like a headless chicken trying to get to all these different places, because they're all pretty close to each other, but also there is a little bit of walking, so you don't really want to be back to back to back, because it's just not going to work. It's not feasible. And not only that, it can get expensive, because even though the tickets themselves aren't super expensive, the cheapest one I paid for was £8, most expensive was £35. Most of them were somewhere around £11 to £14 each. It can get expensive, especially if you're coming here for multiple days. So I came here for 5 days. When you average that many events, it starts to add up. And if you come here for the full 10 days, one event a day, averaging about £11, you're looking at, over £100 just for 10 events. So, it's something to consider. It's definitely not an inexpensive event. But that being said, there is a huge program of free events that are all on that anyone can go to. So whilst my analogy to the music festival isn't quite the same, in the main sort of festival area, I've been referring to it as the festival village, which it probably isn't referred to, but that's what they refer to it as download. So that's my point of reference. There is like kids events, there's loads of kids events that are mostly free, craft events. There's the voice box, which has got loads of interesting speakers coming. There's like a place in the food court where they had musicians on, but also just speakers and someone who helps you with the crossword every morning. So there is a lot of free events. So actually, if you did want to just come sit in the village and soak up the general atmosphere, that's a perfectly viable thing to do. And also, if you only did one event a day, you would still have plenty to keep you occupied for the rest of the day. So I don't think you need to pack the schedule out that much. Second point was accommodation. I don't have tons to say on this because my experiences with Airbnb, I have no other comparison. I will say my Airbnb was much cheaper than the prices I was being quoted for hotels. There are lots of hotels in Cheltenham town centre. However, because it is a very nice town centre, the hotels are priced accordingly. There is a budget option fairly close to the location where you don't need to drive in, but I wanted a little bit of self-catering. I wanted a little bit of space. So a Airbnb was the way for me, and it's amazing. I'm in it right now. It's 1-bedroom sort of studio with a kitchen and a bathroom, and it's very comfy, very clean. It's very snazzy. It's been decorated in sort of retro, bright pink and green colours, and I really like what the Airbnb hostess has done with it. So, and she's been wonderful. So yeah, I would recommend Airbnb if you're not opposed to it for whatever reason. I will say Cheltenham doesn't seem to have the same issue with Airbnbs as other parts of the country I know suffer with. I know in particular Edinburgh has great difficulty with it. But Cheltenham, most of the ones I saw seem to be part of people's homes, or at least homes that they did live in most of the time. Now that might be incorrect. Maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. But yeah, Airbnb, I can't really fault it, especially here. So yeah, very cost effective option. And there's lots within quite good walking distance. My walking distance was about 25 minutes, which for me, living in quite a dispersed city, wasn't very long. And it's quite a nice walk. I learnt it by the end of my 5 days here, which is good because I'm useless at directions. But there's lots of really cool street art to navigate by, including tons of Banksy, which I didn't realise was something that Cheltenham got a lot of. So yeah, some Banksy in there. There's a great one with is it Gazira? The name of the snake from Jungle Book, whatever his name is, I think it's Gazira, trying to eat the head of a traffic warden. But if you stand across the road from it, it looks like Gazira's in the tree that it's on the wall behind. It's really, really well done. And I've enjoyed it every time I've walked past it for the past few days. Third point is packing. I don't really have any revolutionary tips that you wouldn't use for any trip anywhere. So, pack comfy clothes, pack for all weathers and occasions. I did not pack a jacket with a hood. I also didn't bring my own umbrella. Luckily, the Airbnb I'm staying in has an umbrella that's for loan. But yeah, it is October. The weather's a bit questionable in this country at this time of year. So just be prepared for all of that sort of thing. My one tip would be leave space in your luggage for all the books you will buy, because you will buy books. You will come home with more books than you went with, and you will need the space for them. So I did actually think of that and make sure that I had space in my suitcase for some books. I also would recommend something else I messed up on, making sure you check the program and bring all the books that you will need to get signed. So I have a lovely hardback copy of The Luminaries at home by Eleanor Catton. Did I bring it? No, I didn't. So I did not get my own copy of The Luminaries signed. Luckily, the publisher has got a brand new paperback copy of The Luminaries out, which I had to buy because it's gorgeous, and I got that one signed. But I would have really loved to have brought my hardback and gotten that signed as well. So important to remember, if you are gonna, or even if there's a chance, if there is a chance, you've seen that you haven't managed to get tickets to it, but you've seen that there is an author that you have a book by that you'd really want to get signed, and they're gonna be there. If there's a chance, you might bump into them. You don't want to be kicking yourself. So it's worth taking it with you and just being a bit prepared in that area. Transport, again, don't have tons of comparison for this because I took the train. The train station is very close to where their festival's held. So if you do only come for a day, which is perfectly reasonable to do, it's only 20 minutes from the festival place to walk to the train station. And the train station is quite a nice train station. I think it's pretty well connected as well, which not super common in the UK, as many people here will know. But yeah, Cheltenham has, in my experience, fairly decent train lines. Now, some people who are maybe local here might disagree with me, but I live in Stoke-on-Trent, which is not very well connected at all. So maybe I am just a victim of my own point of view. I would recommend maybe carpooling if you're going to be coming with a group, and because Cheltenham's a lovely town centre, but it's also a very historic town centre, and like most historic towns that I've been to, especially historic market towns, the parking doesn't look amazing. I'm not a great lover of driving personally. I drive if I have to. Part of that is because I don't really like finding places to park, especially in busy areas, and just walking around Cheltenham. My opinion has been, really wouldn't want to park here. So if you are going to drive, probably carpool if there's more than one of you going, so you can minimize the pain. My Airbnb came with its own parking space, which I obviously haven't used. So if you do get accommodation that has parking included, that'll probably ease the burden a little bit while you're here. Because I haven't actually looked at this, but I imagine it's probably expensive, all the convenient parking spaces, because it reminds me very much of some local historic towns near where I live. They're very well kept and they're very beautiful, and I do think that's a good reason to control, parking restrictions. You don't want people parking their cars in ridiculous places and over your lovely nice verges and historic monuments. So transport, highly recommend the train, which you don't hear very often these days, but I do. I tend to like the train just generally. It gives you a little bit of time to read as well. And fifth and final section is while you're here, there are book buying opportunities galore. There is a Waterstones within the grounds of the festival, both a child's bookstore and a main bookstore. They are specifically stocked with absolutely every book that will be featured during the program of the festival. So if you want to get reading relevant to the event you're going to, or you hear someone speaking, or you speak to someone at the festival who inspires you to go and pick up their book, you can go and find it really easily because they're all laid out by date on when they've got events relevant to those books. And the Waterstones is also, they've really got their business model down here because they also have pop-up stores outside of all of the events. So if you don't own the book, as you come out and they're doing book signings, you can purchase the book right there and then. And there's a really helpful Waterstone staff member with a contactless card payment. Honestly, they're really enabling us. Contactless card payment reader taking payment for you to buy your book as you're getting it signed. So there's really absolutely no excuse if you want one about convenience. It's all about willpower. But outside of this, Cheltenham is blessed with many, many local bookstores, both independent and chain. Hatchard's I've never been to before. I've never been to any of their branches before, but Hatchard's in Cheltenham is gorgeous. There are wheelie ladders. There are multiple sections. It feels like such a fancy bookstore, but it's just beautiful. And their history section. Now, history is another interest of mine that I just love history books, and it is the most comprehensive history section I've ever seen of any bookstore I've ever been in. It just goes on and on and on and on, and it's separated into all these different sections, and I could have been there for hours. But yeah, Hatchard's is beautiful, but then there's also there's a secondhand bookstore called Moss Books, which was actually having a sale while I was here. The Oxfam bookstore's pretty well stocked as well. There's obviously another Waterstones. I'm pretty sure there's WH Smith. Yeah, many, many bookstores. There is a great looking bookstore called Cheltenham Rare Books, which I wanted to go into, but when I went up to the door, even though it said it was open, then the door was locked. So maybe they're having a private consultation, or maybe it was appointment only. I couldn't find anything online that said that, but I do know some rare bookstores do have that policy. So if you are here, go and check it out. Tell me how good it is. But aside from all the books you can buy, as I said before, I got tickets to one of the proof parties. Now, there were 4 proof parties over the entire program, which are great because you get to hear from mostly debut authors about their newest books. You get proof copies, really gorgeous paperback proof copies in a goodie bag, all included in the price of your ticket. And it's yet another way to accumulate books during this entire festival. It's I've got quite a stack to take home with me at the end of these few days. In terms of food, there are food carts and street food and that sort of thing all within the festival area. I tried to avoid them, not because they weren't good, but because, like most festivals, they are a little bit on the pricey side. Now, obviously, all of the money goes, to the vendors, which are mostly independent businesses or small businesses, and supports the festival. So I did get a few things from there, but I didn't eat there for every meal, basically, because when you're here for an extended period of time, it can start adding up, and I already spent quite a lot of money on tickets, books, and accommodation at this point. So I was trying to use some of my self-catering accommodation and eat when I was back there, and I actually managed to cook some things that I really enjoyed. So, you know, picking your battles once again. So, but I would maybe encourage you to look at some of the small businesses or independent businesses outside of the festival area, because Cheltenham's got a really thriving sort of high street and town and area, and I think it's good to support businesses like that. So maybe spread the love a bit. Have a eat in the festival area, and also eat in some of the local businesses. Try and mix it up a bit. But to close out, basically the entire vibe of the festival is it's just amazing. It's just such a wonderful place to just sit and absorb and watch the world go by, even if you've not got anything to do. I've really enjoyed coming on my own, which I wouldn't have thought, because it's not that I don't like my own company. I do, but I do also get lonely. So as much as I like to have time on my own to decompress, I always tend to return to a full house that's usually bustling with like a dog and a husband and a kid, not mine specifically, just one of each. But um, I usually come back to a very busy house, is what I'm saying. So for me, I wasn't expecting to really enjoy coming to something on my own and be on my own for the whole time. But I actually have, because it's meant I've got to run my own timetable, do whatever I want to do. I've not got to take in other people's opinions on what we do or eat or any of that sort of thing, which is, sometimes nice to indulge yourself in. And yeah, it's just a really nice place to sit and read. I've, on multiple occasions, just taken my book. I've, pitched up in a place in the park area where I can, watch people go by and either listen to my podcast or read my book. So I just think it's a really great festival, and I've had so many wonderful conversations with so many people that I wouldn't have got to speak to otherwise, fellow festival goers, just locals who happen to be passing through, because this is something that they've said themselves that, they're very lucky to have it, and they know they're very lucky to have it, but they do sometimes know that they're a little bit take it for granted sometimes, because it is just on their doorstep. And a lot of them said to me they're reminded of how lucky they are to have it every time it comes around, especially with the other 3 festivals that Cheltenham has. Yeah, it's a really wonderful trip. I would recommend anyone who can do it to do it. I'm going to try and come back for a bit longer next year if I can. I've only done 5 days this time round. I'm going to try and do maybe 7. I don't know. I suppose it's one of those things where, like with music festivals, a lot of my friends will be like, you know what, I'm only going to go to the music festival if the lineup's worth it. But I don't think it's the same for this, because for me personally, I know regardless of what the quote unquote lineup of authors will be, I know I will enjoy stuff. The writers' workshops, I wish I'd been able to go to some of those this year, because they've all sounded fascinating. And I just think it's just such a creative place, and yeah, full of lovely people and lovely things to do. And I'm going to be glad to go home, not because I'm glad to leave Cheltenham, but because I'm missing the family and the dog and my son, and just sometimes it's nice to yearn and miss for normal life after a few days out. Um, it's been a really special time, and I really cannot wait to come back. So, yes, a bit of an unusual episode of the podcast today. If you've enjoyed it, let me know, and I'll do more things like this. I'm hoping it's not been too rambly or too croaky. Yeah, all feedback welcome. But if you want to follow the podcast and see who we've got coming up, I've got lots of really exciting guests lined up for future episodes. Then follow us on social media at Books to Last Pod on both Instagram and Twitter. And you know what? Subscribe on whatever your favorite podcast provider is, but also if you know someone who might enjoy the podcast or who really loves books, wants book recommendations, or even someone who's wanted to go to Cheltenham Literature Festival and has no idea how to go about it, recommend the podcast to them, because I would really appreciate that. And I'd love it if more people could get to hear more of the book recommendations we're given on the podcast. So thank you very much for your time. And until next time, bye for now.